I really enjoy thinking about the history of scientific discovery. It takes time, visionary thinking, and often mishaps in the lab to teach us and advance a scientific field of study. In anticipation of my guest today, I was thinking about the timeline for the science of reproductive endocrinology and infertility. The advances have been absolutely remarkable, and the science continues to evolve. So I just felt compelled to highlight some of the times that kind of big things happened in the world of infertility. So in 1677, so we're going way back, Antoine van Leeuwenhoek, and I'm sure I've adulterated his name, discovered sperm under a microscope, marking a key early step in understanding reproduction. It was then in the mid 1800s that scientists discovered that pregnancy actually resulted from the combination of sperm and egg. In 1944, in the US, researchers claimed the first evidence of human egg fertilization in a lab dish or in vitro. And from that point on, it feels like almost every decade, something new comes into the understanding of assisted reproductive technology, or ART. 1950s, IVF research on animals was conducted. 1960s, the first fertility drugs like clomiphene was discovered. 1978, the world's first baby conceived via in vitro fertilization, or IVF, was born in England, which of course was, a major milestone in the field. And more recently, the role of genetic evaluations prior to implantation has helped couples identify and avoid embryos with significant abnormalities. And there is no doubt there are more discoveries to come. Welcome to Gyno Curious. I'm your host and creator, Dr. Amy Novat. From both sides of the speculum, we're here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please write to radiofreerhinecliffe.org if you have any questions or concerns. And to learn more about my clinical work, go to dramynovat.com. And please, while you're listening right now, go to your phones or to your computers and please follow the show, share the show, because this is what helps me and Radio Free Rhinecliff keep this show going. And quite frankly, all the programs on Radio Free Rhinecliff. So do it now while you are holding on to your devices. All righty. So today we are diving into fertility through the lens of acupuncture, an ancient practice that finds a place alongside some of the most advanced fertility technologies. My guest today is Kirsten Karchmer, an acupuncturist who specializes in reproductive health and fertility support. She additionally describes herself as a health tech pioneer, author, and troublemaker. Welcome, Kirsten. So nice to have you.
Thank you. That was such a great intro. And, just most recently, too, we've made egg cells from skin cells this week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's
Okay,
really, really huge.
you have to tell us a little bit about that right now. So, who's doing this research?
I don't know. Literally, I think I might have read the highlight yesterday or today, and I haven't had a chance to look more deeply at it. It came up in
Okay.
my news feed twice in the last 2 days, and just it's been lots of things going on. So I
Wow.
haven't had time to really
Wow.
look at it. So it's pretty exciting. I mean, it's the polar opposite of the work that I'm doing, but still really exciting, like what we're learning, what's possible, right? I think that AI actually is helping a lot of this research accelerate because you can do so much research so much faster with the help of an algorithm or with a language model.
Yeah. So, I'm going to go to a question I was going to hold off until later, but it just feels really important to dovetail. So, AI is, the newest of new, right?
Hmm.
And how has it been for you as an acupuncturist, a study, a form of medicine that dates back centuries? How has it been for you to dovetail, to join together this kind of advancement, these technologies with this ancient wisdom? I want to hear kind of from your perspective and then how it's been for those who are in, the clinical practices of allopathic medicine, how they've embraced acupuncture in this science as well.
Yes. Okay. So there's a lot of questions there. Let me try and
Yes.
unpack it a little bit. So, yeah, not even centuries Chinese medicine. We're talking 3,000 years is when the first texts on reproductive acupuncture were published. The history, I think that you like history, is very interesting because essentially you had an emperor who really wanted to have a lot of sons, right? Because that's the
Mm.
whole job. And so the most important job during that time was to be a royal doctor. And what
Mm.
it meant to be a royal doctor meant to be a reproductive acupuncturist. So each of his wives had a personal royal doctor who came every day, took her pulse, looked at her tongue, and determined what's going to happen today. What does she need to eat? How does she need to move? How much does she need to sleep? Basically, biohacking. But she had a private doctor doing that. And that's what a good reproductive acupuncturist should do, right? I'm not in practice anymore. I had to give up my license to do what I'm doing because in Texas, the Texas State Medical Board, you have to be in practice 20 hours a week to keep your license.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'm full AI now. So now, they say in Chinese medicine, the good doctor treats the patient, the great doctor treats society, but the master can make herself obsolete.
Ha! Oh, I like that.
Me too. And that is
Ooh.
basically was my goal. I read a study in 2015 that less than 3% of couples could afford fertility treatments.
Mm.
I had an IVF center in my acupuncture clinic. We were very busy. We saw 2 to 300 fertility patients a week in my practice. We had 20 acupuncturists. And all of a sudden, I was like, it just didn't make sense anymore. Helping 10,000 women have babies suddenly seemed really small, where had it seemed really large. I was like, if 97% of the people who want what I was offering can't even afford me, then I want to do something different. I want to dedicate the rest of my life to democratizing access to health for women, starting with
Mm.
fertility. And so we had an idea like, could AI be even remotely as good as me? I was the first reproductive acupuncturist in North America, pretty good at what I did. And so we ran a pilot. We had 105 women just coming to the clinic to see me for acupuncture for 4 months. We had 105 infertile women just use the app for 4 months, no human interaction. Well, on the day that they finished the regression analysis, my data scientist came in. He seemed kind of sheepish and he's like, and I said, oh man, shit, it didn't work. And he goes, oh no, it worked. And
Wow.
the AI is called Kai, Kirsten AI, right? And I said, she is Kai, did she get close to me? And he's like, no. And I was like, oh man. Because the goal was like, if the AI could be 50% as clinically effective as I am, then it's worth it at $15 a month, like practically free. It might not be perfect, but it'd at least give people something to do. And I said, so did she get close to me? He said, no. And I said, oh man, how bad was it? He goes, no, no, you got close to her.
Oh, right on.
She beat you. And I was like, I just made myself obsolete.
Wow. So tell us more about this technology, and this is an app that people have access to now, and tell us more.
So it's really an ecosystem. What we're attempting to build is the first operating system for women's health, starting
Mm.
fertility. So because this is where we pull back to Chinese medicine. So people always say like, oh, I even will describe myself, I was an acupuncturist, but really I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine. And
Hmm.
there's a little bit different because it'd be like, as a gynecologist saying like, you're a speculumer. You know what I mean? It's just one of your tools, right? Or you're a baby deliverer. You're like, well, I do
Uh-huh.
deliver babies or I do use a speculum, but I have a lot of other tools also. And an acupuncturist also has a lot of other tools. But the
Sure.
best thing about Chinese medicine is the diagnostic paradigm, and it lends
Mm.
itself to AI way better than Western medicine. So many things, better and worse in different categories. But for this particular one, because first of all, if Chinese medicine evolved from 3,000 years ago, we didn't have labs, we didn't have surgeries, we didn't have any investigation. We had to rely 100% on user collected data.
You mean the human body?
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
Like, what is the customer, the patient reporting?
Mm.
So the way that the app works is Kai interviews the user first, the woman, if she's or menstruator, and she basically it's just the consultation that I did in my clinic. The goal is to find all the subclinical factors that are impacting her likelihood of getting pregnant. And then we give her a virtual care team. So she has a chef, a nutritionist, a therapist, a data analyst, a tongue analyzer, because we analyze tongues in Chinese medicine, a formulator for supplements. And so after that consultation, the care team, basically the AI care team, come together and they're like, what does she need to get? We built a predictive analytics tool to predict the likelihood of natural conception based on this. We validated that in our pilot. So what we found is when their scores above 60, they had exponential increased likelihood of natural conception. So they went from not getting pregnant to, depending on their age, 150 up to a 260% increased likelihood of natural conception.
Wow. So I'm sorry. So age is factored in there, of course.
Yeah, so age is one of the, I mean, everything is factored. Every question that you could possibly ask, even things that you're not even asking about. What was remarkable is that the 150 improvement was age 22 to 36, and the 260% increase was 37 to 44.
Whoa.
So it was the inverse of what I expected.
That's paradoxical.
Here's why. I think I know why, though.
Oh, tell me, tell me.
This is a hypothesis, so I don't know if it's true, but what I suspect is that it's because as women age, well, first of all, just as they age, right? Peripheral blood supply to the ovaries declines, but we can optimize for that very easily, right? You have to make more blood. You have to figure out why there isn't enough. You have to do things to circulate blood like breath work and use supplements like vitamin E that drives blood to the pelvis. But it's that as we age, some of this is just because we might already have existing children. We're working full time. We're looking at Instagram trying to be perfect. So we're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and exercising before work. And then we're drinking a smoothie. And then we're skipping lunch. And then we're going drinking with our friends. And it's like most of the women who are over 35 that I have ever worked with, basically they start their day at 5 o'clock and they don't stop until 10 o'clock at night. And then they fall into bed and be like,
Yeah.
more and more responsibility leads to more and more exhaustion. So we did see a close correlation. We interviewed 16,000 women last year. The first question we always ask is on a 1 to 10, what's your energy like on a 1 to 10 without caffeine or exercise for 2 days? It's the single best predictor of fertility. And of the 16,000, 8% had energy that was 8 out of 10, which is our goal. 50% had energy that was 5 or below.
I mean, I'm not surprised, of course. Anybody who spends time with other women know this to be true. And, so often on Gyno Curious, I'm talking about the modifiable lifestyle issues that we, really can impact health. And we're seeing it across the board, right? And so I'm not surprised to hear that your AI is realizing how kind of insanely busy women can be in this age cohort.
Mhm.
And I love the idea that this data it's not just Dr. Novat in the clinic saying to, Susie, again, you got to slow down. Let me tell you why. We can talk about inflammation and energy, but to have this data so clearly demonstrating,
Mhm.
percentages and impact is so critical because people tend to respond to numbers. They're
Mhm.
looking for it. And particularly in the world of infertility, where numbers have always been so, so important, percentages, right? So it's interesting to me. You've mentioned a couple of modifiable lifestyle issues. Again, where does or does it not, does allopathic medicine kind of filter into this program? At what point does something like, Clomid or IUI or IVF, what are you doing with this data and where does it take people?
I love this question because there is a place, like, I think all forms of medicine have a right place, but we want the right order of operation. And so
Absolutely.
I mean, even the fertility doctor, the reproductive endocrinologist that I worked with for almost 20 years, Francisco Arredondo, which he's doing really cool work. They've reduced the price of IVF down to $7,500 and and they are getting 50% success rates. So really high success rates, really impressive. That's a whole stuff. You should have him on your show because he's quite a character. But I remember the first day that we met, he's very charismatic and he's got a thick Spanish accent. And he's like, Kirsten, I think that you think that I'm the adjunct therapy, meaning he thought that like the
Right.
primary care should be conceivable and he should be when it doesn't work. And I was like, that's exactly what I think, actually.
Yeah.
So here's what I think. I think often we're jumping to IUI because we don't know what else to do. It's like she hasn't gotten pregnant. We're like, I don't know, like you don't have time and the OB-GYN's office doesn't have time. Like, okay, we need to rework your diet because your PCOS is really, there's no time for that. So you say try to eat less sugar, or whatever. And so what I would like to see is before we go to IUI, what we found is there are three things that have to work for people to stay pregnant. And if those things are not working, it's not worth doing IUI because the foundation for staying pregnant is not there, and the same for IVF. So, highly fatigue. Fatigue is highly correlated with miscarriage, more than infertility.
Hmm.
So, energy is 8 out of 10. Cycle is 28 to 32 days, so that ovulation, we don't have an egg quality issue because ovulation is happening too. This is why I hate fertility monitors, OPKs, all of that big scam and waste of money. And the last one is you have 4 days of bleeding. You soak a tampon or a pad about every 4 hours, not more, not less. No cramping, clotting, or spotting. That person
Wow.
will stay pregnant. That person will
Wow.
stay pregnant very often. Oh, temperatures after ovulation above 98.
So when I think, just of my random cohort of women who are trying to get pregnant, they don't meet a lot of those criteria.
Yeah, none of them do.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So again, part of what Conceivable is helping us understand is just how, in a way, these four criteria can be managed.
Yes,
And that again, without having to go, the extra mile or the extra miles of all this assisted reproductive technology, let's just get the body in a more toned state.
working.
Let's just figure out kind of, it takes you back to, menstruation. Let's just start with the simple status of your hormones, how you're menstruating, how you're experiencing your day to day, and start with that. And I'm not
Mhm.
suggesting that's just simple for all of us. No, no, no. If it were, everybody would be meeting these four criteria from the moment they walk in. Part of what you're pointing out is, again, the disruptors in our life that create some of the disruption to these four criteria. It struck me as you were speaking, Kristen, that's the part of the challenge with the whole experience of infertility is it's kind of the zeitgeist or the psychology of all of us in today's world. I want it today. I don't want to
Mhm.
wait for tomorrow. Why is this not working? And that part of I know what I do in my practice is try to just get people to slow down, literally to breathe, just
Yeah,
breathe. Because one, time is part of healing, but it's not part of the psychology of folks in this country. How do you see conceivable? How do you see helping people slow down? Because that's part of what's going to help those four criteria you were just mentioning, right?
it absolutely. I mean, what I always say, like, I just want to wear a shirt. I always say I want a t-shirt for everything that I think about, and I want a t-shirt that just says it's all connected.
Mm.
Because every single day somebody asks me a question, I just want to be like, it's all connected. It's just all
Yeah.
connected. It's all connected. It's all if you can't make energy, you will not have enough resources to make a human. You have to
Mm.
make a human. It's not like you blink and a human just grows. You have to build it out of something. And so it's like having your pantry empty and you're like, but I'm so hungry. You're like, well, dang, there's nothing in there. That's what exhaustion is. And so what I hope to answer your question, what I hope happens is that, if we look at Simon Sinek's like start with why, when especially for people who are trying to get pregnant, they're a little more incentivized than anybody else to make these
Mm.
changes. So it's why we started with infertility. I mean, that was my area, but really, the good thing about it being an operating system is that that node of infertility, that software back end, that care team will travel with her across her entire reproductive journey, starting with age 7.
Wow.
So she'll have that same team, that same therapist, and they'll age with her. So I'll be like 10 years old in that version, and I'll be in my 20s when they're in their 20s. So all the care team will age with them even. So that think about like if you started using it when you were 7 years old before you had your first period, because we feel like as an OB-GYN, we feel like there is a real paucity of education for young early menstruators.
Absolutely.
How can we have women elevating themselves in society when we don't even give them the basic tools of understanding of their body? I mean, I have a big TikTok on periods and I do a live show, and often they're asking questions like, I want to use a tampon, but I don't have any idea where to put it. I was
What's
like,
the name
there's,
of that show? Tell us, tell us.
oh, it's on TikTok. So it's a live show on TikTok. And
Okay.
the TikTok is the period expert.
Okay.
And then I
Great.
have one for fertility to your fertility expert.
Great.
And that's where I'm live a lot more right now because that's just where I'm focused on. So,
Yeah.
if
But I love this. So you're basically giving girls a tool that, I mean, they're going to be so facile with this AI tool, and app, of course, in ways that you and I, or certainly me, I would never have been. And to just have that teacher, that team, kind
like
of that
sisters.
loving, yeah, exactly, that loving clinical team grow with you and help you. And to be able to also, when I think about something like endometriosis or heavy, painful periods, I mean, you and I both know girls suffer silently for years. They're not
Yeah.
telling their parents. They're not telling their teachers. They're not telling nurses. They're not telling doctors. I mean, they're not telling anybody because they either have no access to care, they have no words to talk about it, they've only experienced shame around their bodies. I mean, there's so many reasons why they're suffering silently.
Yeah.
So to be able to interface with them in this kind of supportive way and say, no, it's not normal to bleed for 2 weeks at a time or whatever. Oh, this is so brilliant.
And to
Bravo.
teach them how to communicate, like because there's a therapist. So it's like she can say to her, the Saren is the like Serenity is the therapist. And so she could say, like, Saren will say, like, you've been bleeding for 2 weeks. Like, I think it's time to go to the doctor. Right.
Yeah.
And say, like, but and she can say, like, but I'm afraid to tell my mom. That's usually like what the
Mm.
girls on the live, they'll say they will use socks for pads to avoid telling their mother they got their period. I'm not exaggerating.
No,
So we
no.
have to find a way in that part of we call it the experience instead of the app, in that experience to really help bridge the gap between making it safe for moms and daughters to talk. Because a lot of the moms that I talk to, they're like, I don't want to talk about it either. I'm so embarrassed and I don't have the words to talk about it. And so we're just going to do it for them. But
Excellent.
but imagine, like, she starts when she's 7 and she has her care team, and then she's 24 and she's like, okay, Kai, I think I'm ready to start trying to get pregnant. Like, what do I need to do? She has her whole history, her emotional history, her physical history, when she got her period. She goes, well, you got your period when you were 11, so that is amazing. You had a little, like, few months of, bumping up, but now we've been working on your period. It's solid. You don't need to do anything. You're ready to get pregnant. But to
Mm.
imagine going to the doctor and the doctor just knowing everything. Well, your parents got divorced in 2000 and, that screwed things up. So we want to pay attention to stress because we saw that really dysregulated your cycle, blah, 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 whatever. So to me, that's really exciting.
So exciting. So I have an interesting melange of feelings around this. As a clinician, and I'm sure you experience this too, one of the beautiful, most fulfilling aspect of my career is developing relationships with my patients and being in the room, feeling their energy,
Touching their
um,
bodies.
touching their bodies, looking at them in the eye. And I do believe, I mean, science has demonstrated there's benefit to this kind of communication. But of course, what I'm hearing you say is that this app is going to provide care to folks who have otherwise not had access to care and affordable care. And, particularly in, as you pointed out, in the realm of infertility. But I think it's going to be stretching into kind of all aspects of medical care, given the way we're going, is that
Hmm.
there's going to be millions and millions of women who will not be able to afford their insurance, will not be able to afford their doctoring, but maybe can afford an app. And
$15 a month.
yeah, so I'm so grateful for that. But
Hmm.
how do you reconcile, you were nodding and you acknowledge that there's something about the human touch that is so powerful. How do you reconcile it?
So I don't think that AI should replace humans. And I think that human interaction is really important. The goal of Conceivable is so that when that girl comes to you, all the stuff that's related to epigenetic factors is already fixed. And she might have two symptoms. It should make your job so much easier because, like, my daughter has a chronic autoimmune disease. And she's 20. When she goes to the doctor, they still haven't diagnosed it. She has like 100 symptoms. right? She'll say, and then I have this, and then I have this, and then I have this. And I can see the doctors like, whoa, okay, okay. It's just, it's so much. They're not seeing the patterns, right? Because there's so much. Some of it's related to anxiety, some of it's related to insomnia, but it's too confounding. So what
Yeah.
I hope is that we do a better job taking care of all the stuff that needs all the education, teaching them
Mm.
what to eat, like providing menu plans, teaching them what to eat, showing how that affects it, teaching them, telling what supplements and providing really high quality ones for them, doing all of that legwork so that when they come to you, either they're in good shape, or if they're not, if something is not repairable with those things, then it should be very clear to the physicians meeting with those patients what's going on. It's not going to be like, wow, there's 1,000. No, this person does not have a B12 deficiency. They're not D deficient. They don't have a gut issue. They're sleeping. They know how to cope with the stress. They're doing therapy every single day. And you're like, okay, now I can see very clearly what's going on and what's happening next. So
Mm.
what I would like is that everybody uses conceivable until their score is above 60, and then they try for 4 to 6 months. If they don't get pregnant, they go back to you, right? Then they start Clomid, then they start IUI, continuing to optimize, because even we know that Clomid has some negative side effects, right? Dries up cervical discharge, makes the period shorter, shortens the luteal phase. So there are things that we can do to offset those negative side effects associated with it. And what also happens, which is interesting that you probably may not know, we use basal body temperature in a completely different way than just predicting ovulation. In my practice, because we are seeing so many infertile patients, and basal body temperature charting was not part of my traditional Chinese medicine training, but everyone was bringing me their chart. And a good acupuncturist is a pattern differentiator. That's our training. And I started noticing patterns in the basal body temperature chart that correlated with what I was seeing clinically, like all the women with PCOS have a particular basal body temperature chart. The people who have a lot of PMS will have a lot of sawtoothing. The people who have low progesterone don't get above 98 after ovulation. The people who have high FSH will have really high temperatures before ovulation. So you can start spotting those early problems. And when people take Clomid, each month the follicular phase temperature goes up about 1.5 tenths of a point.
Mm.
So if they go in for like 3 cycles, they can be hovering. We would like it to be around 97.2, ideally before ovulation. We can see them coming up a lot closer to 98. And in vitro fertilization cycles, when their temperatures were at 98, the eggs were fracturing at a very high frequency. So it's
Interesting.
basically that elevation in temperature during follicular recruitment is causing that zona to become more brittle and fracture during insemination.
So there's people out there listening who are probably thinking, I don't really understand all of that. So I want to just
Oh,
break it
yes.
down. And basically, what you're sharing with us is that these micro differences
Yeah.
in temperature can impact the efficacy of in vitro, the quality of the egg,
Mhm.
and that using an app, for example, might help really understand where, for example, temperature might be, and that this is important.
Yes.
Anything to add to that that folks can understand?
What's really helpful about taking your basal body temperatures is that not only does it help us see where there's areas, I call them opportunities, where there's
Hmm.
opportunities to improve your fertility and your health, right? You don't have to be trying to get pregnant to use this model, but also it's the feedback loop. So,
Mm.
say your temperatures are averaging 97.5 after ovulation. That's half a degree too low. That's quite a bit too low, in my opinion. So then, if the AI is doing it, then she's asking her, okay, well, and we'd think like, well, what's necessary to have the resources to raise the temperature that high? Well, we need energy. So you see a tight correlation between the more tired they are, the lower the temperatures are after ovulation. And if that's true, why is she tired? And then you have to
Right.
figure that piece out. But then it's all hypotheses. So you're like, well, I think she's tired because she's only getting 4 hours of sleep. Let's get her up to 8 hours of sleep. And what happens? See what's happened to the temperatures. So
Yeah.
either that does it or we go to the next stage. Okay, let's view what else would be causing that to be true.
But I love this. This is granular in a way that so many folks can't be in an office setting. You're right, that clinicians are overwhelmed with EMR, with, checking boxes whether people are wearing seatbelts, even though everyone wears seatbelts. The time spent in offices these days are so inefficient and rushed. And so often folks don't get to ask these kind of granular questions. So I think this is remarkable that this gets to happen. My second question was going to be why you include troublemaker in your description, but I now know it's fantastic. You are disrupting things, and that's great. That's great.
I like to break things. And just, the reality is that we can't stand by and allow the people who can't afford resources to just be shit out of luck. I just can't do that. You know what I mean? And so it's like, well, we can't ask our doctors to work for any less than they're working or any more than they're already working. You guys are so overwhelmed. And I didn't want a bunch more acupuncture clinics, and that's not scalable at an affordable price either. And so this idea of like building something that so many people told me was completely impossible 6 years ago, it's been fun. It's interesting because even my team, they'll be like, whoa, that's too big. We're building some face scan technology. So each day you do a little update and we have a wearable ring, but some people aren't going to be able to afford that, even though it's priced pretty well. Still, it's going to be cost prohibitive for some people. So we're going to build this face scan technology that in the morning, when you would take your basal body temperature, you're just going to hold your phone up and it's going to, and then you're going to answer some questions like, what was your energy yesterday? How many hours of sleep did you get? And just tell me about your day so she can see, oh, this is really screwed up, whatever. And then during that, we can analyze her voice for sentiment, and we can analyze her face for body composition, VO2 max, HRV, and blood pressure. And we'll use that to predict adverse birth events, which I'm really fucking excited about.
Wow. I am postmenopausal, so I
Me
am not
too.
having any more babies. But boy, I think I want this app just to keep myself as healthy as possible on a regular basis. And again, I have the knowledge, I know what I need to do, but I'm not always doing it. So the idea that I've got this, this friend in my back pocket who's basically asking me in the morning, how are you feeling? It's cool.
Just a
Very
little
cool.
check-in. And unfortunately, I think a lot of women today, nobody asks them how you're doing.
I'm pausing because not only do I think you're absolutely right, but I think it's even beyond that. I think that it's not just not asking, but certain assumptions around, well, you're just doing that. So I'm not even going to ask. So there's so many layers to that in terms of dissociating from women and how they're feeling, expectations, societal constructs and expectations around what women are doing.
Mhm.
Um, and, certainly one of the challenges, at least that I see with the world of technology, is that people are building less community face to face. And we know that community is important for our well being. I don't know enough about the science of male health, but I certainly know that the science around female health, cancer healing, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. So much of it has got to do with having community.
Well, if you look at the blue zones, right? They
Hmm.
drink and they smoke, all of them, but they spend a lot of time in community. So, to what you're saying, to me, because I like to have a glass of wine, to me, that tells me that community trumps even alcohol and smoking, even though I'm not saying, please do not miss, I'm not suggesting people start drinking or smoking, but if you think that's how important it is, right? And it takes a lot of time. And recently I just moved into a condo because we had toxic mold at my house. And we had to kind of move out really
Oh,
fast.
hmm.
This is the first time I ever lived in a condo, but I feel more community in this condo than I've ever felt in any neighborhood that I ever lived in. Just it's
Fascinating.
just, people just go down to the pool and hang out, and people talk to you in the hallway, and it's just smaller, closer quarters, and just feels really good. And actually, I made a friend, and I'll go to her house in my pajamas sometimes, because she's like down. It's like when you're in college. It's really fun.
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
been
that's
really
great.
enjoying it.
That's
But,
great.
I think that you're right. When I started my practice, this is, a long, long time ago. Beforehand, I read this book, and it was called Never Eat the Burned Toast Again.
What a title.
Right? And
Yeah.
I was like, it was basically about like not putting everybody ahead of yourself. And I thought in my clinics, when people come to my clinic, my house, my clinic, they're never getting the burned toast. They're not even going to get the
Mm,
option of the burn toast. And
mm.
I got really just kind of obsessed. I wanted a t-shirt for that again too. And then I started asking, so I asked a lot of women, do you know what this means? I'm not going to eat the, like, oh yeah, definitely. You take the burn toast so that everybody else can have the good stuff. And then I asked like a bunch of men and they're like,
Mm.
what are you talking about? I've never had the burn toast in my life. I would just throw it away or whatever. I would take the good one and, it's like Gloria Steinem's, essay on if men could menstruate,
Right,
men
exactly.
could menstruate, menstruation would be the coolest thing on the planet.
So speaking of penis havers, let's talk about them vis-a-vis this app. And we know that infertility data suggests up to 40% of infertility is a male factor. So what about them? And how do we shift some of the focus, the responsibility, the science, the technology, all that you're doing? And pardon me, I don't mean to suggest what you're doing isn't unbelievably fantastic. But
Hmm.
what about the men in the grand schema of things too?
We need to build technology for men too, but I got a
Yeah.
lot of work to do first. And instead of bros before hoes, it's hoes before bros. So I got to get from 7 years old to postmenopausal done. Luckily, the back end is the same, but the experiences will be different. And then I'll build one for the men too. But it's really fascinating what your listeners might not know. You're right. Some data even show 50% of infertility is related to male factors. So if you're on a journey to motherhood, I like that better than infertility. Remember that a semen analysis is probably pretty important because even if
Mm,
you're just having recurrent pregnancy loss, like morphology, a morphological problem, like that's the DNA of the sperm, can absolutely contribute to pregnancy loss. So if you're in really good shape, your conceivable score is above 60 and you're miscarrying, check a semen analysis. But Paul Turek's work, he's a researcher and urologist in California, published a paper that showed that men with abnormal semen parameters, meaning they have low count or they don't swim well, those kind of things, have significant higher risk for prostate cancer, more severe prostate cancer, and earlier onset prostate cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. And so a semen analysis is really the canary in the coal mine. So I really encourage, I think that, I mean, men never go to their annual exams like we do because we need a pap smear, but I think it would be really beneficial if like every few years men had a semen analysis because basically it's just like your period. It is a complete reflection of how your body likes how you're caring for it. So people say, my husband's got really low motility. Motility is how fast do the sperm swim? Well, the first questions I'm going to say is, what's your husband's energy on a 1 to 10, no caffeine or exercise? Because you know what? Tired men make tired sperm. So you got to figure out why is he tired and fix that and then do a semen analysis, 3 months later, and you'll see maybe 4 months later a significant change. If he's got morphology problem, that means the sperm are like they've got broken heads, they've got two heads, they've got multiple tails, the DNA is all screwed up. This, you want to look at all those epigenetic factors like the chemicals, EMFs, all of those things are your environment, what he eats, plastic, all of that. The thing is that unfortunately, sperm is a lot easier to fix than our whole fantastic, system that we have. They're just, my mentor always says, she's like, men are very simple. She goes, they're like that little wooden block that holds the door open. And I thought that was really funny. She's like 90 years old. And coming from her, I was like, that's the funniest thing I've heard in my whole life.
Oh my gosh, may I repeat that one?
Oh, please, please.
That was fantastic. Well, of course, I'm already like jumping ahead in my mind around all of the fascinating data that conceivable will generate when it's looking at both penis havers and vulva havers because it's going to be different. We know it's going to be different, right? Just everything from the integration of how emotionally people are in their day to day to their diets, to their exercise, to all of these things and how they contribute not only to the capacity to have children, but just in their lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking as you were describing this how the world of childbearing, it's such a rich space with science, ethics, emotion. And I guess I'm wondering about the cultural background of how the app comes into play. Let me speak a little bit more about that. So part of what you've shared with us is that this is an opportunity to make understanding one's body more accessible to folks. It's also an app that's going to generate data so that when you interface finally with your doctor, that data will be organized and straight, just easier to use, and hopefully your visits with doctors will be more efficient. There's a cultural influence in healing. And people look at their bodies in different ways based on where they come from. It's not just the epigenetics, but it's also kind of where they are here and now in terms
Hmm.
of time and space and religion and economy, etc. Was that part of the creation? Was that considered? Because when you're speaking to a woman who might be an Orthodox Jew or Muslim or Christian Scientist, those backgrounds are important,
Hmm.
particularly when it comes to childbearing
And sex,
and sex.
right? Because there's a
Indeed.
lot of taboos. Yeah. So I have a master's degree in cultural linguistics. So culture is
Aha.
very important to me.
Yeah.
It was not a priority in this first version.
Yeah.
There were just, we just have so much money. The best cultural thing that I can support right now is that if, you have a chef, right? And if you don't tell her, she will make mostly like Western style food recipes for you. But you can absolutely, like, if you're in Africa, right? And we're recommending like Mediterranean type food, you're like, well, where am I going to get bulgur and parsley in Africa? So you can just tell your chef, like, hey, I live in Mozambique and, I want foods that are consistent and I'm a Muslim and this is the kind of food that, then she can absolutely handle that. It's a bigger undertaking from the AI point of view. Like, so right now, the technology is many different AIs running it. And in the new build that we're working on, so we're completely rebuilding the app to a unified AI. And that
Mm.
unified A is how it will know everything about whatever you share with it over time. It won't have to move between, oh, now I'm talking about fertility, now I'm talking about pregnancy. It will be able to see, like, oh, you touched this and you did this, you're pregnant, change the experience, and now here's the content that you're going to get, and here's the benefit that we're going to monitor and make sure you don't have an adverse birth event and that kind of stuff.
I can only applaud you just thinking about all the variables that make us individuals and how that individuality impacts how we heal, how we see our bodies, how we are in the bedroom, how we think about motherhood. It's so
Labor and
nuanced.
delivery.
Labor and delivery, etc. So, pardon me for going to the place of culture, but when I think about healing people, I think about of course, where they're coming from because it impacts how they hear me, how they
It,
experience what I recommend.
yeah,
So
because it impacts how they're listening,
that's right.
right?
Exactly.
By seeing
Exactly.
them, it really allows them to trust you
Mm-hmm.
and be like, she cares enough to know that because I'm a Muslim, that, during Ramadan, I'm not going to be having sex or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Right. Right.
to have that
Exactly.
sensitivity, I think that that means a lot. And especially in a political climate right now where everything is being whitewashed like crazy. I'm,
Yeah.
really upset about everything. We could have a whole other show talking about that. It's
Indeed.
just so much information.
Yeah. So we're coming to a close, and I want folks to know how to learn more about your work. What is the best way for people to stay in touch with where Conceivable's at and just to know more about you and your troublemaking?
Plenty of places. If you go to TikTok, as long as TikTok is still up, your fertility expert, there's thousands of videos where you can sort of get a deep dive. And if you want to do it yourself, that's a way to do that. I'm just finishing my second book, and we're going to actually give that away. It's about fertility, it's the road to better fertility, and we're going to give it away in audio form because I need you to understand what I'm thinking when you're using the app. It'll help you to be more successful using the app. If you go to our website, conceivable.com, you can see our personalized supplements. This is something I'm extremely proud of because there's a lot of people selling supplements on social media. 95% of them are so bad. So bad. The prenatal that most of you take, per what people tell me, I found on Alibaba for 80 cents. Like that's what they're paying, and they're charging 35. just so bad. And so we had a line of clinical grade supplements, but by the time the person ordered the things that we thought would be beneficial to them, like the least things, the smallest amount of things that we think would really be important here, it was two, three, $400, which now again we're back into not affordable. So we've just
Yeah.
recently found a new manufacturer that allows us to keep the same quality, think Metagenics or Thorne, but now they can either take a quiz on our website and get personalized supplements for their fertility. Again, there's no supplements for fertility, but once we know the underlying issue, so it might be for insulin resistance or for egg quality or anti-inflammatory, antioxidants, that kind of stuff, for two-thirds what you would pay on Amazon. So higher quality, totally personalized, and two-thirds the price of what you would pay on Amazon, delivered to you monthly, no plastic. So if you want to check that out, you don't even have to use the app. And you can get the app from the App Store. It's called Conceivable with Kai. And even if say you're a person who just has PCOS or endometriosis, or you just have bad periods and don't want to have them anymore, if you can, for now, put up with just the fertility talk, it does the same thing, because in order to get an infertile person to be fertile, you have to fix all the period problems. You have to repair all the underlying issues that are causing the period problems. So you're good. Just ignore the fertility talk.
Well, I would suggest that I might say it a different way, that fertility isn't just about conceiving children, that
Mm.
it's about the fertility of our body, the richness and capacity of our cells to create health. So, just a thought.
Amy, you just made me cry a little bit. I
Oh,
love that it's about the fertility of our body. I mean, as we were switching after we had already named, starting with fertility, I was like, but conceivable means it's possible.
yes.
It's
Yes.
possibility, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, my last question for you, please, is when you are not doing the work that you're doing, what do you do for pleasure? For
Plant.
you,
I love plants. I'll
plants.
even show you, like even on my little desk,
Oh, look at that.
but there's 80 plants. I have a little tiny condo. We have 80 plants here on the patio in the house. Because
Great.
growing plants, like house plants, is very easy because there are so many good teachers on social media, and you get a win. You get so many
Mhm.
wins. Like if you're working on something hard, you might not have so many wins, and you come out and you're like, "Oh my gosh, you made a baby today. Look, this is beautiful." Or I have this like one plant and it just like all got all these leaves, and I'm like, "Look at you, beautiful." When you're growing house plants, if you're into it, I mean, if you're not into it, I have a lot of mother energy, and now my kids are grown, so I think that's probably why. But it's like, even when you're like interacting and talking with your plants, you're like have this real sweet nature and you're like delicate.
Mm.
There's no research on it, but what I've been working on a lot is trying to downregulate my nervous system. I'm trying to get my
Oh,
heart rate
yeah.
variability up to 100. And I find that like fooling around with plants, it's pretty cheap. You can get so many plants on Facebook Marketplace to just kind of try it out. And then they start having babies, and then you have more plants, and it's really fun. What do you
May
do?
you have, what do I do? No one has ever asked me that question. That's
Rude.
interesting.
I get to be the best guest then.
There you are. Absolutely. For today. Well, let's see. What do? I go out in nature. I take
Mhm.
walks and I spend time with my dog. So walking with my dog outside, that's my pleasure point amongst many other things, but that gives me true joy.
Mm.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me today. I'm so pleased. And I have to tell you, I have 8 pages of questions. I never once looked down. So thank you for such a stimulating conversation and so much to think about, and for what you are going to give, well, women, couples, people who menstruate. I'm so excited for you.
Oh.
So excited for you and for all of us, actually. So, everyone, I am speaking to Kirsten Karchmar, and I want you to look her up, please. I also want to thank Jen Hammoud and Maddie Rosenberg for making this podcast possible, as my engineers, my producers, and to David Hoffman, who edits the shows, and to the Epicurean, this delightful, wonderful, delicious store in the back of which we are Radio Free Rhinecliff, and to thank all of you who are listening. Please, again, if you have a moment, follow us, share the show. It really helps. And please stay well. Listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored. And please stay curious about all of it.
Amen, sister. That was great.
Mm.